Hi, I'm Frank Coleman. I'm the Bureau Chief for the Secret Agent Project, and welcome to the latest video in this ongoing behind the scenes, behind the music video series regarding the making of the debut Secret Agent album entitled Declassified. This is song number 8, Madrid. This song was created in what I call like the middle period of the arc of my creation of this album, which I don't even like to think of how many years it took. But Secret Agent, the radio station, went on the air in 2000. It's now 2020. Yeah, somewhere in there. So anyway, the first period was Buenos Aires International Airport and Washington, D.C. The second period was this, Portofino, Zurich, and Berlin. And the third period was Caracas, New York, and St. Petersburg. And my production modus operandi was sort of broken down to those three nodes. Buenos Aires and Washington, D.C. were kind of haphazard. Looking at the score for this one's even more haphazard. But by the time I got around to phase 3, I'd really started to get my act together as far as organizing my my whole production workflow and everything, which only means something to other audio engineers, I suppose, whatever. But for me, it was part of the whole sort of evolution of thought that this whole project was and entailed for me as it evolved. Anyway, this is Madrid. Madrid is by and large made up out of loops, pre-existing loops from the Apple library. Let's see. I see a couple of tracks in here that actually I think maybe don't. Yeah, there's a ride cymbal part. But other than that, I think they are basically beats and stuff and sounds from the library. Let's take a look. This is the whole layout. This is Logic, and each one of these rows is an individual part of the song. This one right here is this. You jump down here. Let's see what we got for this. So what I'm doing here is I'm hitting this S key as I'm soloing each one of these. So we're listening to each one as I'm stacking up the entire thing until we finally hear the entire structure over here. Let's see what this one is. Let's see here. Like there's some more drums down here and percussion too. Let's bring in the bass. I mean, what a great bass line. Let's see what we got here. I think this is like guitar parts here. Yeah. Yeah, okay, so you get the idea how this whole thing stacked up. That was sort of the way it was composed. Pretty much just like that. I would start off with a blank slate, and then I would open up the Apple Loops library, and I would go look, search for whatever, probably Latin to start with, and look up drum parts and what have you, and just start bringing bits and pieces over, and start layering them until I had something that sounded like what I had in mind. So let's unsolo all this so we can hear everything. Let's take it from the top. And down here is all our dialogue tracks. Let's see what happens here. Now this is the kind of intro that I kind of like, because it's sort of playing a bit of a practical joke on the listener. It's got all these things just sort of floating in the air, and you're really not quite sure where the ground is, where the beat is, even with this bass part, and even as the drums come in, you'll see. It kind of keeps you in suspense for a little bit until it finally drops you in, and you suddenly get the context for everything that you've been listening to. Now this beat up here, this is just a bossa nova beat sped way up. That's it's sped up, you know. I mean, I love Latin music, and I started playing Latin music in high school because we had jazz band in high school, and easily 40-50% of the repertoire was Latin flavored music, because that's what was available to us as high school kids to learn. And Latin music is actually, for a musician, in a lot of ways, certainly for a drummer, possibly even more difficult than jazz. I mean, a rock beat is like dun 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 da dun da dun da, right? A Latin beat is dun da cocoon 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 da cocoon. It's got this offbeat going over here, and you got this jumping rhythm of cocoon cocoon cocoon. Always this kind of like forward propulsion thing going, and then you've got against that this in da 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 da. It's like triplets against it. Three against two is this constant motif in Latin music, carving the beat up so there's groups of threes and twos. It's you got to practice. So it's loads of fun, loads and loads of fun, and as I say, some of the most difficult music. So. Okay, so let's introduce our characters here.
I've been waiting for you.
Somebody should have told me.
I've been waiting for you.
Somebody should have told me.
Now, shall we talk business?
What kind of business?
Now, shall we talk business?
What kind of business?
Now, so as I was saying, this is sort of in the mid period of the life cycle of developing this project. And so during this period, what I was trying to do was prototype and comp a lot of stuff quickly using loops from the loop library, and also using the dialogue loops and using repetition to try to make them more like lyrics, more like, feel like they were part of the, had the function of lyrics as opposed to just being random bits of dialogue, because repetition creates that feeling, that musical sort of feeling. This is Andy Warhol 101, right? So So anyway, yeah, and I think it kind of works in a weird sort of way. As far as the source, this is from a public domain film called Tokyo File 212. The woman is Florence Marley. She was actually better known as playing the vampire in Queen of Blood. But here she's playing this Spider Woman, talking to this jut-jawed American agent guy. And the rest of it stars nobody. It's basically a propaganda film that the government did in combination with the government in Japan. It has absolutely nothing to do with Madrid whatsoever. But I just love that tete-a-tete between the two of them. This could be happening anywhere, right? This could easily be happening in a bar in Madrid, not a bar in Tokyo. Anyway, so get your evidence where you find it. And then we go into this this drum break thing here, which, you know, I love the drum break. I always think of Hullabaloo, these shows that they had on TV when I was a kid, and they would do these crazy shots with the audience is going wild, and they would zoom the camera in and out like that, and that's what I always think of whenever I do these crazy drum breaks with lots of delay and stuff. Also, trying to explore some interesting stuff beat-wise that, you know, the Madrid thing is like it's got one foot in Latin music, but it also has one foot in Moroccan music as well. And so I tried to use sounds that were sort of like synth-ears and, you know, things like that, as opposed to just, you know, stereotypical stuff. So it had a little bit of that authentic flavor. Anyway, let's see what we got here.
This might cost you a trip to Madrid.
So yeah, so I was just having fun playing around with this, and this comes up later on as well. This sort of alternating implied major, minor, major, minor, major, minor, major, minor thing going on between the bass and the guitars. And then it's a little break there, you get this little extra added, you know, tension in the upper end there, just to kind of tweak your nose a little bit more. And then we get more samples of the Spider Woman.
Oh, you're American, always making jokes.
We do that to cover confusion.
Now, shall we talk business?
Again, the repetition.
What kind of business?
Now, shall we talk business?
What kind of business?
You know, and you know, playing with song form here, trying to see if I can break the back of what is considered a song and still have it be a song. You know, it doesn't really have a melody. It has a very strong melody that latches itself into your head, but it's not coming from the vocalist. Break. So yeah, it's, you know, got this stacking thing happening with the rhythms, almost like a Russian doll. You know, the motif of the Russian doll arrangement happens in more than one place, as does the motif of division, the left and right division, and then here you have the timbales, whackada, 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 banging around left to right again.
This might cost you a trip to Madrid.
I've been waiting for you. I've been waiting for you.
Now I was listening to these tracks soloed earlier, and I was noticing some interesting stuff. Like, this is the piano break that we're listening to. Right, and then there's this guitar part here, a real guitar. It's a stringed instrument. Yeah, the thing is that this doesn't really have anything to do with this. Listen to the two of them together. They almost sound like they're out of, something's out of key. Right? And the reason why is because the bass is what stitches it together. Listen to it now. Still sound a little weird? Let me take the piano out. Listen to it now. Right? Listen to the piano with the bass. So the two parts sound perfectly in key with the bass, and yet when you put the two of them together without the bass, they don't. When you put them all together, let's bring in the whole band. Yeah, I pulled them in and out just to kind of, give a little contrast.
I've been waiting for you.
You really only hear it. You really only hear the backing track of the stringed instrument at the last resolution upward, where it resolves up to major. And it's got that minor tension all the way through. Minor, major against minor,
I've been waiting for you.
major, minor, minor,
I've been waiting for you.
major. And here we go into the solo. This is all Apple loops scissored up. Let's see what we got here. Yeah, there's a bunch here. What we got here? Yeah. Those were the building blocks that I used. Change key, rearrange, slice, 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 and diced, and you can hear the result here. From that came this. Yeah, it's one of those banana peel endings. I'm fond of those. Yeah, so that solo, I wish you could see the original slicing and dicing that went on in Soundtrack Pro. That doesn't work anymore. But that was the program that this was originally created in, and then had to be ported over probably about 10 years ago into Logic. But there were a million cuts to make that solo, and also changing key up and down all over the place. And it's one of the nice things that Soundtrack Pro let you do, is be able to drop in little bits and pieces and be able to audition them in different keys really easily. Another fine piece of technology just like lost. But we have other things that do the same sort of thing. You just have to learn the interface. Anyway, so that is essentially Madrid. We have these two characters, and then we have this long, gorgeous flamenco-esque kind of guitar solo here. We stretch out. I was thinking very much of my dear friend Scott Collins, who plays like this. He's one of the members of the Bent Men. Anyway, so if I ever do this live, I'm going to have to bring Scott out to do his interpretation. Let's see. I believe that is about it as far as interesting stuff with this piece. If we look at the mixer, as I was alluding to before, it's in even worse shape than some of the other ones. Let's see. There's actually 2 drum sub mixes. And then there's this thing called Huge. This is just like all the reverb and stuff. There's bass, there's guitars. But like guitars and other crap gets mushed together. Samples are down here. I at least kept those separate. I was learning, Anyway, that is Madrid. We will move on to the final song, Zurich, next. Hope you're enjoying all this. See you later.